So let's get into our discussion about spiritual growth and how the meditation that I've taught you helps with spiritual growth and how we think about spirituality and spiritual growth. If you haven't gotten the purple book yet, you should get my purple book. It's a collection of 67 essays. And I'm going to refer to a number of the essays today, so I forgot to mention to you guys for the class, if you have your book, get your book, and you can refer to some of the essays with me and read along. I'm just going to read some excerpts from some of the essays in the book. You guys know my first book is this book, Overcoming the Fear of Death, Non-Religious Approach to Helping People Deal with Death and Dying Issues. And this is a collection of 67 essays on how to live life freer from suffering, which is how I want to start our discussion about spirituality. And then I'm going to weave this all together, talk about some of the topics in this book, and weave it together and talk about how the meditation technique that I've taught you guys and how I teach it helps unfold our spiritual growth, our self-development, our knowledge of who we are to ourselves. Okay, that's how I look at spirituality and spiritual growth. Knowing ourselves, know thyself. You've probably heard that phrase before, know thyself. How do we know more about who we are? To me, that's what self-development means. But let's start with this idea of suffering and happiness. So there's an essay here on page 31, those of you who want to follow along with your books. On page 31, there's a short essay here on suffering and happiness. And I want to talk about this idea because this is an idea that whether you think about it this way, it really permeates our cultures worldwide. You guys know I help people in 60 countries now, all different religions, cultures, belief systems. Doesn't matter if you have a religious belief or a non-religious, you're atheist, agnostic, it doesn't matter what your belief system is. I help people. And what tends to permeate all of our cultural thinking about happiness and life is this. One of the ideas is an idea that we're really here to get somewhere else. What do I mean by that? A lot of people believe that, well, we're just here on earth to learn lessons. People will say that. And that's sort of true, but it's not always true. Not everybody is here learning lessons. Some people are just here kind of bumbling through life and not learning much. You know, learning has to be an active process. You don't automatically learn stuff. Has anybody ever gone to school before? Hello, you know, and you know, you go to school, if you don't pay attention and you're looking out the window all the time, how much are you learning? You're not. You have to pay attention. Not everybody in life in general outside of school is paying attention all the time. So, you know, how much learning is there going to be? Not a lot. So yeah, some people come here to learn, and life is about learning. And that's my choice. That's the way I look at life. And that's the way many of my students look at life. But not everybody, not every year, the 8 billion human beings are here paying attention. So that's one way that a lot of people look at life. Oh, we're here to learn lessons. Okay, some people are, but maybe not everybody. Another way people look at life as they here on earth is they think of it like, well, I'm just here to get to heaven. That's another belief system that's out there. And whether you even think about it that way from a religious standpoint, many people look at life that way. And they kind of, like in this essay, I talk about this idea here. I'll read a little excerpt. I said, although I was a Buddhist, this I'm talking about myself, Kelvin Chin, although I was a Buddhist in several former lifetimes, I no longer view this world in terms of suffering. Okay? Because many Buddhists, if you don't know, many Buddhists view this world in the physical planet Earth world living in a body as a world of suffering, and that this is a world of illusion. They use this word Maya, M-A-Y-A, which simply translates to illusion in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is an ancient language. To me, this world is and can be full of enjoyment on many levels, mental, emotional, and yes, physical. Most Buddhists would not agree with that. They view this world as just a way station along their path to get to the real world afterwards, nirvana. Christians would call it heaven. Same idea, though. Thus, the Buddhist views on suffering and taking on the suffering of others while they're here on earth, that's a phrase that you'll hear Buddhists use in their spiritual path. They'll say, oh, we're here to take on the suffering of everybody else. You know, that's where that comes from. Because to them, living on earth is less important than living in the afterlife. I don't agree with that. I'm not saying that life is a bowl of cherries and is easy. Many of us have gone through and are going through very difficult, challenging, emotional, grief-ridden losses of loved ones, and that is not pleasant, you know. And the loss of the loved ones could be human, animals, could be anything. You know, my family and I, my daughter's cat, we almost lost. His name is Louis, and he's such a loving being, such a loving soul. He's a cat, but everybody loves Louis, and it's my daughter and my ex-wife's cat. And I went over there and I taught meditation at their apartment to help feed Louis some, you know, good vibes and stuff, good energy. And for whatever reason, Louis rallied, and we thought that the vet, my daughter actually made an appointment for the vet to come over and et cetera, because he had had a stroke. It seemed my daughter and my son witnessed him having a stroke. It was horrific. But he rallied and he seems normal now for whatever reason. So we cherish those moments, but we dread the moments when we lose loved ones. And yes, life has those moments in it. So I'm not a Pollyanna. You know what Pollyanna means? Pollyanna is a character from some story, I don't know when, 1940s or whatever. I view life realistically is what I mean. I'm not a Pollyanna who just views things like, oh, life is beautiful all the time. No. And there are spiritual people who view life that way, and it's not realistic. Life is full of challenges, but the issue is, can we more or less live a life of greater amounts of happiness than suffering? To me, that's a happy life, okay? More happy than less happy, okay? Because nobody's life is perfect. As we've said many times in many of my classes, you've heard me say this. Nobody's life is perfect. But the issue in terms of happiness, to me, is understanding a number of basic principles. And some of those basic principles, these very fundamental, to me, they're very fundamental life principles. You want to call them spiritual principles, call them whatever you want. But to me, it's a way of living life more fully and more happily, less suffering. It's relative, but less suffering. And so that's why I choose to do what I do, to help people live life with less suffering. But to me, our minds are sovereign entities. So this is one of the principles. Our mind is a sovereign entity. What does that idea mean? Sovereign entity. Those of you know anything about history and thinking about how people use that word sovereign, they use it more in a political sense, but I'm not using it politically here. I'm using it spiritually. But if you think about it from the political way that you may have heard of the word sovereign, like it comes from the old historical ideas that there's a sovereign king or a queen or an emperor or a pharaoh or whatever. There's a leader, and the leader leads, but the sovereign entity, whether it's the sovereign leader or the country, is sovereign. That's another way it's used more politically. I'm going to use it spiritually with you in a second. The idea is that the sovereign country has its own laws and cultures, and it has its boundaries and borders and so forth, and its laws, as I said. Okay. It's a unit is the point. That's how I'm using the word sovereign in terms of spirituality in our discussion today. We are all sovereign minds. Our minds are sovereign, meaning we govern them. We govern our minds. Nobody else governs our minds. This is the idea of free will that's in some of the essays, several of the essays in this purple book. The idea of free will. Free will means choice. We make choices. Other people may think they make choices for us. Sometimes our parents might feel like they're doing that. I'm making your choices. All right. But we always decide whether we listen to them or not. Some of you have had children who are very rebellious. You know exactly what I mean. Some of you have had 2-year-old children. Does the 2-year-old always listen to you? No. Our minds are sovereign all the time. Sometimes at different points in our life, we may have to give up that sovereignty in a sense to listen to our parents or whatever, or whoever's with us. But we always have that choice. That's the point. We always retain the ultimate choice throughout our lives from a spiritual standpoint. So when I say spiritual, some people may say, well, what about if you're locked up in jail? No. I'm not talking about it physically. You may get locked up. Look, I have had lifetimes where I've been imprisoned in solitary confinement by other countries' leaders. There's historical reference to these things that have happened throughout history, of course. That's not a choice you're making. But while you are in solitary confinement, imprisoned rightly or wrongly, you control your mind. I'm talking about it from a spiritual standpoint, okay? We control our mind, all right? Therefore, even in these moments, these horrific grieving moments that some of us have been through and some of you are still going through right now, my heart goes out to you. You guys know that. I'm just pointing out that while you are in those moments, it is possible, not always, doesn't always happen, but it is possible to experience oneself as a distinct being who's experiencing the sadness without getting overwhelmed by it. That is where, to me, I may not call that a state of happiness, but there's a state of inner peace, I think, is a more appropriate way of languaging that. I use the word happiness. I use it in the title of this talk, Suffering and Happiness, because that's the word that most people use. I want to live a happy life. Okay, great. I understand that. But to me, a more correct or accurate word is inner peace, is inner contentment. That's, to me, a better, more accurate word. I use the word happiness. I understand that. Example, I went to my uncle's funeral recently. Was it 11 months ago? No, something like that. Almost a year, okay? My uncle was 92, 93 years old, something like that. He'd lived a full life. I was saddened, obviously very saddened by my uncle's death. He's married to, and my aunt, who's quote unquote much younger, like 6 or 7, 8 years younger than he is. She's still alive. She's in her mid-80s now. She's one of my mom's youngest sisters, and you know how close I was with my mom. I was very close to many of her sisters, to all of her sisters, because I was the first grandchild. So, if those of you been around kids, or if you had grandchildren, or you've been a grandchild, you've been a child in a large family. Both of my mom and my dad came from large families, 11 and 8 kids. And when you're the first grandchild, all the focus goes to you. So I was it, So I was close to my uncle. He died. Was I sad at his funeral? Absolutely. I flew to his funeral in Boston, but was I overwhelmed by the sadness? No. And was there an inner contentment and inner peace there? Yes. Okay. Now, it may have been much more difficult if it was my own child, God forbid. My children are still alive, but I know some of you have lost children. But I'm just saying, I'm drawing a distinction between happiness. I'm using that example as I wasn't happy at the funeral, but there was an inner peace there. That's to me what I mean when an example of what I mean when I talk about not being overwhelmed by the challenges we live in life. To me, that's living a grounded life of happiness. We could call it happiness, of more accurate, of inner peace and contentment. Okay, to me, that's the goal of my life, and maybe it's the goal of your life. I'm suggesting that's a healthier way, a more realistic way of looking at it than saying, "Oh, I'm happy all the time." Okay, because Paula, we were talking about that earlier. You know that no, nobody is happy all the time. You may think like you're happy most of the time. Okay, yeah, okay, fine. But when we go through these challenging and tremendous losses of a personal nature, of a loved one, not going to be happy. Okay, so my example, remember the example of my uncle, you know, inwardly at peace, but not happy in that experience of going to his funeral. No, 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 no. But was I suffering? No. That's where the rubber meets the road. I'm suggesting that we can go through challenging life experiences without suffering. And so let's talk about this a little bit deeper. What do I mean by suffering? I'm talking about this distinction here. So let's talk about it this way in our spirituality discussion today. I don't know if you can see, I'm trying to get this not reflecting. Okay, there you go. You see that? It says conscious of blank, and it says XYZ, right? Conscious of XYZ. All right. What does this mean? Actually, let me put this on speaker view. So here you go. So now I think I'm showing up bigger on the, at least on the recording, I will. Conscious of XYZ. This is a model that I use in many of the essays in my purple book. And then I talk about it also in this book, my Overcoming the Fear of Death book. Conscious of XYZ. So let me explain this to you and let me describe how it fits in with many of these ideas, these spiritual ideas that we're talking about together, that I teach about. So I want to give credit and a shout out to my friend Charlie Donahue. Charlie is my friend who came up with this model, okay, in the 1970s. I first learned it from Charlie in 1970, 1971, back when we were both teaching meditation in the very early days of my teaching of meditation. Let me describe to you Charlie's model. What he said was, this model, these few words here, could describe everybody's life experience, every mind, every soul, every consciousness's life experience. Everybody's life experience could be described this way. We're conscious of different things. It's not complicated to think about this, right? This model makes sense, right? We're conscious of different things. And he wrote a line there as a blank and he put XYZ. Why did he say XYZ? Because what we're conscious of changes. Sometimes it's Kelvin's words you're hearing on a Zoom call right now. Other times you're during this same call, the conference call we're on to today. In the class, you're conscious of, oh, my foot itches. You're conscious. So that's a Y. You're conscious of, oh, what I ate for breakfast. That's a Z. Conscious of different stuff, X, Y, Z. It changes. Okay, that's the explanation of why his model looks that way. Okay, doesn't that describe a life? I'm not just talking about meditation or spirituality or anything. It just describes our life, right? We're conscious of different things. We're conscious of words, thoughts, emotions. We're conscious of driving down the street and we're conscious of cars. We're conscious of pedestrians. What we're conscious of changes. Okay. What Charlie would say is this side of the equation, he called this side of the equation, the XYZs, are what he called objects of experience. They're the objects of what we are experiencing in life, because this is, as I said, a model of our experience. What he said, what most people forget is this side, the conscious side, the consciousness side. They forget and they identify, he said, with this. They identify with their thoughts, their emotions, and their things, the stuff they own. Oh, I drive a BMW. I used to have a Ford, whatever, a Fiesta, and now I got a BMW. I'm a better person. No, you're not. You're not your car. He said, but people identify with their cars. They identify with their jobs, how much money they make, how big their house is, what neighborhood they live in, where their kids go to school. Those are all objects of experience, the XYZs, okay? He said, no. You've forgotten about this side of the equation. This is who you are. You're not this. You're this. You're your consciousness, your mind, your soul, your spirit. He used the word consciousness. I'm just filling in other synonyms that you may resonate with you. Consciousness, soul, spirit, awareness. I use the word mind, M-I-N-D, because I use simple English, because I'm teaching across so many cultures and languages where some people, English is their second, third, fourth language. So I want to use easy English for people to understand. And I like to use plain English. But consciousness, that's who we are. We are the experiencer. This is the experiencer of all our experiences on this side. All right. That's another way of looking at the sovereignty of our mind. We are the experiencer of our experiences. We're not our thoughts and emotions. That's a mistake that many of you have made in your conversations with me in other discussions that we've had. People incorrectly think that they're your thought, that we are our thoughts and emotions. We get overwhelmed more easily by that. How does your meditation fit in with this? Your meditation is starting to, as soon as you learn to meditate from me, you started to connect yourself more consciously with this side of the equation. This is not bad, but this is not who you are. It's a partial description of human experience. This is a full description of human experience. By connecting yourself consciously with yourself, that develops more balance. And the key to life and happiness and less suffering is balance between these two sides. Balance in life. You've heard me say this a million times in all my classes to you guys, right? Okay. It's the Houston Astrodome analogy is another analogy you guys have all heard me talk about. You've heard me talk about it on the audio clip on my website, that 3-minute audio clip that describes it. And in my books, both of my books, I talk about the Houston Astrodome analogy again, right? That's that psychology professor at the University of Houston came up with this. And he said to the students, no, your mind is not like this little 8-inch bucket with 10 or 15 ping pong balls. Those are your thoughts and emotions bouncing in and out of it. A little 16-centimeter bucket. No, your mind is huge. It's like this huge football stadium. That's your mind. But there's no lights on, so you don't know it's on. You don't know it's there. I'm teaching you a simple technique. I've taught you guys a simple technique that opens your mind up to the vastness of your mind. That's, in this model, that's this. Not just this. This is the little 8-inch plastic bucket part of your mind experiences this stuff. I'm teaching you a technique that opens you up to the consciousness side, which is the outside of the part of your bucket too. Also, and that expands the conscious capacity of your experience. This is a model of experience. The technique I'm teaching you guys, the turning within meditation technique, expands your conscious capacity. What does capacity mean? This is a glass of water. It has a certain capacity. I can't fill this glass of water up to this much water. If I do that, what happens? It spills out of the glass. What does the technique of meditation I'm teaching all you guys do? Expand your capacity. Think of your mind like a glass of water. If you have a bigger glass, you can fill it up with more information and you can have broader, more expansive experience. Those of you who want to expand your spiritual capacity, You need to expand your capacity of your experience, which is what the technique does. Okay? So you have to turn within. A greater capacity for spirituality cannot just merely come from reading a scripture or reading a book or going to a workshop or watching a bunch of YouTube videos, right? Doesn't matter how many thousands of dollars you paid to go to that workshop with guru so-and-so or spiritual teacher XYZ, you know, so-and-so, blah, 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 or doctor this or doctor that, spiritual teacher. You paid, you know, thousands of dollars to go to that for a week, 2 weeks, every day, and listen to him or her talk about spirituality over and over again. If you're not turning within regularly, you're trying to fill up the same glass of water. You have not expanded your conscious capacity, okay? All you're doing is pouring more water into a glass that's this big, and you've been to this seminar, workshop, or watched all these YouTube videos, and it's just spilling over. You went to so many conferences and you go walk out and you go, wow, my mind is exploding with all that amazing stuff that I heard. Yeah, it's exploding because your glass is the same size. You haven't expanded it. You have to turn within. You have to turn within. That was Charlie's point in this model also. If you're not constantly connecting with this side, you are not expanding your capacity for experience. And then you're just going to be filling up the same size glass of water over and over again. And you're just replacing the water with new water, which is okay. It's not nothing. I'm not saying don't go to workshops, don't read books, don't watch helpful YouTube videos. Like, you should subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. There's 120 videos there so far, and it's all free. You know, I'm not saying don't watch my videos, but don't just watch my videos. If you're not meditating and turning within and expanding your capacity, you're just replacing the information with new information. It's okay, but wouldn't it be much more effective if you were continually, every day, twice a day, meditating and expanding your capacity for experience? Those of you who want to connect with loved ones from a spiritual standpoint, you want to connect. So many people come to me and they say, I want to connect with my dead loved ones on the other side. Well, yeah. And I say, okay, what are you doing from a capacity, you know, expanding your capacity standpoint? Well, I went to this psychic and this medium, and I, you know, went to this workshop, and they taught us all these, you know, things and about how to open up and da, da, da. Okay, fine. But what are you doing on a daily basis to expand your conscious capacity to make the glass not a glass size now, but now it's the size of this room that I'm in. And then eventually it's the size of the community that I live in, this glass I'm talking about. Expanding your capacity to the size of the Houston Astrodome in that analogy that you guys know. If you're not doing that, you're not doing everything you could do. And to me, back to the idea of happiness and contentment in life, that's foundational. That is fundamental. And that's fundamentally missing, quite frankly, in most people's life experience. And it's not complicated. You guys know how simple it is to turn within, and how simple it should be to turn within. It should not be complicated, and it should not involve any focusing and controlling the mind, as we've discussed many times. It should not involve clearing the mind of thoughts. That is all counterproductive to a natural, easy, effortless way of expanding our conscious capacity into that vast football stadium that is our mind. It's even bigger than a football stadium, but I'm just using that psychology professor's analogy. All right. Here's another theme that I talk about in this purple book of mine, this collection of 67 essays. We are not, I'm looking on page 172, those of you who are following along in your books, page 172. And I'll read the title because some of you may have the ebook, because the ebook doesn't match up with the pages, of course, because you can change the font size and everything. which changes your page numbers. But the title of the essay is, We Are Not Disconnected from Each Other. We are not disconnected from each other. Many people in spiritual circles are all trying to get connected with everybody. And that's okay. It's not a bad thing. But that's not the fundamental thing. If we really want to change, move the world peace positivity needle, we'll call it, move the needle more towards a more peaceful world, it's not about getting everybody to just sit and close their eyes together and be more connected. Some of you may be going, well, wait a minute. I was just in this world peace meditation thing to connect with people. Doesn't that help create world peace? I would say it will help make people feel better in that moment who are meditating together. But is it really affecting long-term world peace? No. Why? Because you cannot control other people's minds and choices. You can influence them. Yes, and we talk about that in this book. Influencing is not the same as controlling. Hopefully you understand the difference between the two, right? You cannot force. Controlling means control. It means you have guaranteed absolute control over other people's choices. No, you don't. You don't. That's what free will means. Everybody can choose not to believe or think the way you want them to believe or think. It's just reality, all right? But can we influence people? Yes. That's our approach that we should take, not a forceful approach. Most people take a forceful approach. That's a mistake. I used to, in my youth, in my naiveness, my naivete, my naive Kelvin part of his lifetime in my youth, in my 20s, I was a little bit more forceful. And what, you know what that did? It led to disappointment in me when people did not listen to me. If you listen to me, that's great. If I can help you, that's great. But if you choose to not listen to anything I'm saying and you think that I'm a crazy person making all this stuff up, I'm okay with that now. It's your choice. I'm here to help people look at things through different lenses, different approaches. Whether it helps you or not is your decision. You need, and I respect that. So some things I may say may not resonate with you. That's okay. I respect that. You need to listen to yourself. We each all are sovereign entities. Our minds are sovereign, meaning we need to listen to ourselves and make our own decisions. We are on it, what I think is an eternal journey. Eternal journey. Eternal means no beginning, no end. Lasts forever. Eternal journey of figuring things out, and we need to figure things out for ourselves. Yes, you may listen to a teacher, whether it's me, get ideas from a teacher, whether it's me or somebody else, but you each individually have to figure it out and decide, does this make sense to me or not? And use the stuff that makes sense and shelve the stuff that doesn't. But back to this essay on We Are Not Disconnected from Each Other, 172, page 172 in the paperback version. It's really about connecting with ourselves is what I'm saying in this essay. See, the problem is the external focus, even in spiritual circles, on connecting. We need to connect with other people. What's that? Charlie would say that's an overemphasis on this. All these people outside of ourselves. But then you forget about connecting within yourself. So it's not that you cannot connect. Sure, the double negatives there, sorry. Yes, you can connect with other people, but don't forget to connect with yourself regularly. That's the balance issue, okay? So many people will get together and have a world meditation of X million people on day such and such. That's not going to help make world peace a permanent reality. It really isn't. What's going to help do that is each person choosing to go within and change themselves in whatever way, whether it's my meditation technique, something else, or whether prayer helps people, or whether it's a combination of my technique and prayer, because I have many ministers and priests and nuns and monks and different spiritual leaders who do their own thing and they do my technique. So you can do a combination, that's okay too. But whatever people need to do, whatever people choose to do, they need to go within, because if they don't go within and they're just doing the outside stuff, it's just going to have a very limited, impermanent, very temporary effect on planetary behavior, okay? Behavior of humans on the planet, I mean. Okay? That's essentially what this essay talks about. Another essay we'll open it up to questions in a minute. I'll just end with this one, because these are just, selected essays that I'm picking out of the 67, the few essays and ideas that we're talking about, is the one on page 193. Those of you who are following along in your book, page 193. And the title is Spiritual Materialism Revisited. Spiritual materialism is an idea that I came up with the name spiritual materialism. Maybe other people did before me, I don't know. But what I mean by spiritual materialism is when we use materialistic metrics. So usually materialistic metrics to measure our degree of spirituality. It's wrong. It's a mistake. It's kind of like, people will often use materialism in a financial way. Oh, you're so materialistic. All you can think about is money. Or you judge everybody by how much money or how big their car is, how big their house is, or where their kids go to school and all that. Materialist. Okay. That is an accurate way to use it in a financial or a social way, socioeconomic way. I'm using it in a spiritual way. And I'm using it in a spiritual way because many spiritual people don't realize how materialistic they are. They think they're so spiritual. They're not, because they're very materialistic in their way of measuring spirituality. First of all, I don't think spirituality can be measured. That's my blanket statement. I think that's the only absolute, and one of the few absolutes you can talk about in spirituality. You can't measure your own or anybody else's level of spirituality. And I think it's a waste of time. I think it's arrogant. I think it's arrogant. I think that hubris is involved, which is a degree of arrogance, which is huge. I think it's very narcissistic. And I think it's impossible on top of it all. You can't measure. Yeah, like how spiritual, maybe I'm more spiritual than I used to be because I'm comparing myself to myself. That's all you can do. But there's no degree, there's no level that I'm at. And you can't judge other people. If I can't judge myself accurately, how can I assess other people? All right, we may do it from a cocktail party talk, gossiping amongst ourselves. Whoa, is that guy, you believe what that guy or that woman said? I'm like, okay, fine. We do that. I mean, in an informal way. But what I'm saying is objectively, it's impossible. Okay, so don't waste your time really seriously thinking about it. Jokingly, we can say stuff. Okay, fine. Because really, we're talking about internal. When we're talking about spirituality, it's about what's going on internally. It's not how many times you went to church. That's all external stuff. What were you doing when you're sitting in church? Oh, I was balancing my checkbook. And when I'm sitting in the pews, I was balancing my check. Yeah, I was like, how spiritual is that? But I went to church every day. I never missed church. That's like, ugh. That's what I mean when I say spiritual materialism. So many people judge, well, how much money did you put in the whatever they call the tray? I can't remember. It's so many years since I went to church, but you know what I mean. The collection, the tray, they pass it around and whoa, geez, somebody put $20 in. Oh, that put a $50, that was $100. I only could put 50 cents in. I'm not so. That's like a spiritual materialistic way of looking at spirituality. It's so silly, right? But people do. Some people do. I'm saying it's so self-limiting to look at life that way. But look at it. I'm telling you, I spoke at many IANDS conferences, and it's a very good organization, IANDS, International Association for Near-Death Studies. You can look them up, iands.org. It's a nonprofit.org. Okay, I've spoken. I was the keynote speaker at their conference in 2019. I spoke about 6 times at that one conference, the 4-day conference. And I've spoken every year, virtually since COVID, at their conference. Not this past year, but I think I'm going to speak next year again when they have the in-person one. I think it's in Alexandria, Virginia. So I'll help promote it for them a little bit here. But check it out. But my point is, I can't tell you how many times I had conversations with people in the hallways at these conferences who have had near-death experiences, and they're so proud of themselves having a near-death experience. It's okay, I get it. You had a near-death experience. I had a near-death experience. I've had, like, you guys know, I've had many, we don't have to count, spiritually transformative experiences. I almost drowned once, and all my past life memories opened up when I was 26 years old. So in 1977, and my memories go back 6,000 years. I've had many, I don't know how many, countless, many experiences communicating with the other side since 1986 and so forth. But when one has a near-death experience, I understand. It's like a what? Because I've been there. It's like, what the heck was this? Okay, fine. You have your first spiritual experience. It's like, what? Am I making this up? I've been there. I understand that. So we have a very materialistic approach towards it, is my point initially. But don't continue in that vein once you have developed a familiarity and an understanding of what happens. There should be an assimilation. If you're still walking around the conferences, still talking about the same near-death experience over and over and over again that you had, and you're not advancing the football down the field, you're not growing. These experiences should be experiences that inform us more about who we are, not defining moments in and of themselves, which is the way most people at these spiritual conferences talk about their spiritual experiences. All right? They are defining moments that define who they are. And then they just stagnate. I'm sorry, I'm just being direct. Those are materialistic views of these spiritual experiences. Don't treat them as a goal that you have had that now informs everything that you've experienced, and not continue to think about things and how you can think about them potentially differently. To me, that's what spiritual growth can be. Maybe not is for everybody, but that's how I look at things. So I'm constantly questioning and changing and adjusting and slightly, and those of you who've been in my classes, you know that I may say some things the same, but some things slightly differently in a future class, because I have changed and perceived things slightly differently. Okay? That's a non-materialistic way of looking at spirituality. Okay? It's the 100 million room castle. I'm going to leave you with this analogy, and then we'll open up to questions. It's the 100 million room castle analogy I talk about in that spiritual materialism essay in my purple book. What's the 100 million room castle analogy? The 100 million room castle analogy is our mind is like 100 million or 100 billion or 100 trillion. It's not the number that's important. It's a big number. That's the point. A castle with like a lot of rooms in it, 100 million rooms. And most people are born and live their entire 75, 80 year, 95, 100, 110-year-old life in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 rooms. And that's it, and they die. I'm just picking a small number. Don't focus on the number. The number is not important. But they live in very, very few rooms of their mind their whole life, and that's it. I'm teaching you guys how to expand your capacity in the meditation technique that many of you have taken with me. Expand the capacity of the mind. That's that making the glass not just this big and not this big and not this big and not this big, but as big as, I don't know, as big as the town, this glass, as big as the town or city you live in. Big, 100 million room castle. Okay. Don't just limit yourselves to living in a few rooms in the castle. Continue to meditate. Just, you guys know who've taken my class, 10 to 15 minutes each time, twice a day. That's all you need to do. If it's an easy, effortless technique, you don't need to be doing it hours. The only reason people are doing it hours and hours and hours is because the technique is not easy. If it's an easy, effortless technique, you don't have to do it very long. And the mind expands in this very short period of time. You may or may not feel like it expands each time you meditate. That's what, those of you who've taken my class, you've heard me say many, many, many times, do not focus on how you're feeling during your meditation. No, do not judge, do not assess your meditation based on how you're feeling during your meditation. No. That's just feelings. Feelings come and go. Your mind is expanding a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more outside the bucket part of itself every time you meditate, whether you realize it or not. And I was in the experiments in 1970, 71, where they could see that the brain waves and the brain activity and they could measure the blood chemistry and so forth and all this stuff. They could see that changes were happening. And yet we were just sitting there thinking about, in my case, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Crosby, Stills and music going through my mind and thinking about what I'm going to do on the weekend, whatever. But my mind was expanding and my cortisol level is shifting and my brain chemistry was balancing. I know that because I was in the experiment. You guys meditate. Every time there's an expansion going on into another room of that 100 million room castle. Don't get stuck in the relaxation room. Don't get stuck in the room full of light. Oh, I had this meditation. I felt so relaxed. Oh, great. What do I tell you? That's fine. That's great. It's a pleasant experience. Don't go looking for it again next time. Don't go trying to make it happen. What'll that do? Lock you into that room. No, you want your mind to expand into another room of the 100 million room castle. Doesn't matter how pleasant the room is. And also it doesn't matter if you're in the room that's a room of sadness, and that will happen, right, Paula? Sometimes that will happen, and that's okay. And you allow your mind to be in that. Or Rosary, you got a problem room, and your mind is in the problem room, and that's okay. Like you shared with us earlier, you let your mind be in that. You don't fight your mind out of that, because you fight your mind will get stuck in it even more. All right. You allow your mind to flow wherever it's going in that 100 million room castle when you're meditating. Different from when you're driving a car down the street. You pay attention. Look to the windshield. Don't hit the kids in the crosswalk. Pay attention to those cars. But in meditation, you're in an allowing mode. We talked about, right? That one word, allow, not resist, not controlling your mind in meditation. You're in your allowing mode. And that allows the mind to go into all the different rooms of the 100 million or 100 billion room castle that is your mind, your consciousness, your soul is that big. Allow your mind to consciously wake it up. It's not good enough to intellectually know that your soul is huge. That's what they'll tell you when you're sitting in the church pew, okay? You're sitting there and they'll talk to you, oh, your mind, your soul, okay. Or you're in this spiritual workshop with guru so-and-so or spiritual teacher, Dr. so-and-so, yada, yada. Okay, that's fine. Okay, it's not nothing. It's okay. It's nice to hear. It's inspirational. But have you opened yourself up to that experientially every day so that it becomes You become you. It's what it is. It's consciously, not intellectually, experientially, consciously, experientially. That becomes your norm. That's what this simple technique that I'm teaching you guys does. It opens you up spiritually. Now, some of you have come to me just because you have headaches, or you have panic attacks, anxiety attacks, or you have fears about death and dying, or you have other issues that are not spiritually oriented issues. That's why you came to me. That's fine. That's why I learned to meditate. I was highly anxious. I was not into spirituality. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know what it meant. I quit going to church by then. I didn't even think of spirituality outside of going to church. I didn't know what it was till I started having spiritual experiences of my mind opening up and experiencing its hugeness. And I went, what's that? That's what the meditation did for me. I didn't learn meditation to be more spiritual. Some of you come to me with that objective. Okay, fine. But most of the people don't. Most of the people are motivated by an immediate need to reduce their anxiety. And I teach them. But this technique is going to reduce your anxiety and also open you up to the 100 million room castle that is your mind. All right? That's how I teach you guys to look at life, spirituality, meditation, turning within as a key tool. It's a tool that helps us open up more to who we are and to allow our mind to experience the fullness of itself. That's it. Allowing our mind, keyword allowing, not resisting, not controlling. You can't control your mind to relax. You can't control your mind to expand. Expansion is a side effect of getting out of the way, getting that 8-inch plastic bucket part of our mind out of the way. And then boom, you naturally experience the vastness of oneself, one's soul. Our individual consciousness is huge. We don't merge. I'm not talking about merging. So just to be crystal clear about this, we're not talking about merging with some oneness or merging with other people. We can feel connected to other people and other beings and other cats and dogs and horses and beings and even inanimate objects. I feel connected to the earth. All right? That doesn't mean I merged and became one with it. That's it. Merging means you lose your individuality. That means you have no experience. You have no ability to experience. That's what merging means. So when you hear people use the word oneness, they often don't understand what they're talking about. Okay, merging means lose one's individuality, no identity, no ability to experience. Okay? If you're experiencing, you're still retaining your individuality. You could experience in a very different way when you're experiencing the vastness of the Houston Astrodome part of our mind, football stadium part of our mind, the vastness of our mind, the experience, the description of Charlie's how you would describe this experience may be different, but it's the same model. You're still conscious of something. What the something is may be very, very different type of experience that you've ever experienced before, but that doesn't mean that this model of experience no longer applies. It still applies. As long as you have individuality, you have this model, all right? So there's no merging. Merging means no possibility of experience of any kind, okay? Good, questions? Open it up to questions, questions. I'm gonna go off of speaker view so I can see you guys. Hello, everybody. Now I can see who's here. Questions, anybody?
I was getting back to the meditation part. I just noticed that when I was kind of visualizing a river, it helped me with the flow, And then definitely with the resting afterwards, definitely was a good thing.
Good. But during the meditation, if you automatically, Marianne, have a visual of a river, that's okay. But in this technique, you do not intentionally visualize a river, because what did I say? There's no supposed to's in this meditation. It's not better to feel, Marianne, that you're in the flow than not in a flow. You could feel very mechanical in turning within meditation and be meditating correctly too. The only reason I told you the analogy of being in a river and being in the flow is to not resist whatever's happening. Don't use that analogy as a goal to picture in your meditation. Just like I use the Houston Astrodome analogy, you don't use that as your technique to visualize in the meditation. Just like I just told you the 100 million room castle analogy, it's an analogy. It is not a description of the technique. Don't transpose those two, Marianne. Okay? Right?
Okay.
Right. Other questions?
Yeah.
Other questions?
And I like the one about don't forget to connect yourself regularly, because that's been something I've been doing intentionally for the last year or so. It's just making sure I take care of me. And it's been really, really, it has been helping me expand my experience, because I'm much more thoughtful about the human connections that I do have, instead of getting caught up in all that, you know.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. The consistency, the regularity of the twice a day is so powerful. And I'm not here to guilt people. Those of you guys know, I jokingly but seriously tell you, I grew up in a Catholic town outside Boston, okay? I'd say 70, 80% it was Catholic, you know, Irish, Italian Catholics, you know? And then there was the minority family, the Chinese family, the Protestant, there were a handful of us Protestants, and then, you know, about 5 or 6 Jewish families. So that was I jokingly say, we were the minorities in the town, in the Catholic town. So I'm not here to guilt you. That's why I say that. All my Catholic friends, I had many Catholic friends then, you know, they're all walking around guilt-ridden. This is not about guilting people into meditating twice a day. But does it make a difference? Absolutely. And I'm not going to name names, but there are some people here on the call, you know, who just connected with me in the last 24 to 48 hours, who meditated. I'm going to tell your story without mentioning your name. Meditated regularly for 8 months. 8 months, every day, twice a day, and had no anxiety anymore. Was calling me up early in the morning, some days,
Want to potty?
you know, with lots of anxiety. Okay. And there were, and then the anxiety went away. And I hear this story so many times. The anxiety went away, and this person stopped meditating and thought the anxiety was gone. And then the anxiety came back, and the panicky and the sleep problems and all that stuff came back. Do we need to meditate twice a day regularly? Why? Don't look at it as a discipline that you need to do. Think of it as people will say to me sometimes, they'll say, Marianne, I'm trying to mute. Marianne, can you mute yourself? I'm trying to mute you. Yeah. All right. So people will say to me, but do you become addicted to meditating? And I say, well, do you become addicted to sleeping at night? If you view sleeping as an addiction that you have to do every night, then okay, yeah, then you could view meditation as addiction, but I don't view sleeping as an addiction. I view it as a necessary thing that I need to do to stay balanced. And life is all about balance. So is meditation a necessary part of our staying balanced in life? Yes. Turning on the parasympathetic nervous system regularly twice a day. Parasympathetic is the medical term for the opposite of the fight or flight response. Turning it on twice a day, because we live in such a world of fight or flight, that triggering flight or flight so much that we have to do something mechanical, we'll call it mechanical, meaning every day, twice a day, call it meditation, call it whatever you want, to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. We need to do that. We didn't need to do this 50,000, 150,000, 200,000 years ago. Why? Because in that world, we didn't have to be at class or at work. We didn't have to have a meal, prepare a meal for our family at a certain time. Okay? We lived more communally.